Okay, here we go. Got a video on INFPs. I love INFPs. INFPs are one of my favorite types, if not my favorite type. I love INFPs. So yeah, in this video, I'm just gonna do kind of like a comprehensive INFP video. I'm gonna talk about some cognitive functions. If at any point it gets like too difficult to understand, I do have a Myers-Briggs playlist, which I will link up above. It starts at just like the letter dichotomies, like introvert versus extrovert, intuitive versus sensor. And then it kind of goes in order, chronologically in the order that I feel like would be best to watch them. And then it goes down the list, gets more and more complex as you go. So I'm going to be taking that information and kind of tailoring it to INFPs in this video. But if you're not familiar with cognitive functions, like if you're just like fresh off the test, maybe watch those videos first. The 16 Personalities website that gives you like a 4-letter code actually is just a code for cognitive functions that came first. So there are 8 cognitive functions, and according to Dario Nardi's research, they basically correspond to different parts of the brain. Different people will rely on a different region of the brain more often than other people will. So there are 8 cognitive functions, and this is a code. So the 2 middle letters, N, F, that's kind of like the meat of this. And then the I and the P on the ends are just kind of like a code. So I'll tell you what this means. So everyone's second letter is considered their perceiving letter. It's how you perceive information. It's how you learn information. So for INFPs, N is how you perceive information. Everyone's third letter is their judging letter. It's how you make judgments, make decisions. So for INFPs, that's F. So you're going to make judgments, make decisions based on your inner feelings and convictions. So that last letter, P, says that you show the world your perceiving letter. It says you show the world your second letter. So you extrovert that second letter. So it's N, abbreviated with a little E, extroverted intuition. You show the world your intuition. And that just automatically means you introvert your judging letter. So that's, for an INFP, that's introverted feeling, abbreviated FI. And then since you're an introvert, so you have those 2 cognitive functions right there, NE and FI. And since you are an introvert, you prioritize the introverted one, and you secondarily prioritize the extroverted one. So your first cognitive function is introverted feeling, abbreviated FI, and your second cognitive function is NE, extroverted intuition. But you do have 4 cognitive functions, so it kind of drops down. Your second function and your third function are direct opposites of each other. So since your second function is extroverted intuition, the opposite of extroverted is introverted, and the opposite of intuition is sensing. So introverted sensing is your third function. And then your fourth function is the direct opposite of your first function. So since your first function is introverted feeling, your fourth function is going to be extroverted thinking. They're direct opposites of each other. So those are kind of your 4 cognitive functions. They work together in very specific ways. So that first cognitive function is like your dominant strength. You're using it like all the time, like 98% of the time you're using that cognitive function. Your second cognitive function, extrovert intuition, has the potential to be a really big strength. Sometimes it's underutilized, and that's kind of a big growth point, but it really has a potential to do a lot for you. Your third function, we'll do a lot of talking about, but it tends to be overutilized, and it tends to be utilized in kind of negative ways. So a lot of times people have to do growth around that function. And then your fourth function is usually not used very much at all. It's either used negatively, maybe it'll be used in a spike for like 30 seconds for fun, or just like not at all. So it's usually underutilized because it's the direct opposite of your first function. So since you love your first function, that's how you feel like that's like who you are. And since they're direct opposites, you're like not gonna really use that fourth function very much. So your first function is introverted feeling. It's all about how do things feel to me? What are my beliefs? What are my convictions? What do I feel like is right or wrong? It can sometimes have a tendency to be kind of like black and white, like this is right or this is wrong. People should be doing this or people should not be doing this. It can be very artistic. It's all about, how do I feel about things? And so that can lead to a lot of really beautiful and sometimes dark art. It understands like all the nuances of feelings. Like maybe there's one action and you feel 20 different things about that one action because you just understand that there's like a nuance to all these feelings. And as you go through the world, you're judging, because it's a judging function, you're judging if actions are moral or immoral, or if people should be doing that, or if people should not be doing that. It's a great function. I love talking to people that lead with this function. Yeah, it just really gives an artistic bent. Your second function is extroverted intuition, and it's all about the what if. So intuition is kind of about possibilities, like things that aren't necessarily existing right now. And extroverted functions tend to expand things. So introverted functions kind of distill down and bring more clarity. Extroverted functions expand and like they generate possibilities and what if and ideas and creativity and invention and novelty. That's all about what extroverted intuition is about. So when you couple introverted feeling and extroverted intuition, you come up with some like really deep ideas. A lot of authors are this type, and so a lot of protagonists in books are this type. Just like this really, like, you know, kind of like the deep character that kind of doesn't feel like they fit in, that thinks really deeply about things, that maybe has what they might consider like bizarre ideas. I've heard one INFP call herself like a freak as a child. Like, there's something about extroverted intuition that's very unique and very different. Both of these two functions are unique and different, and so it can cause them to feel a little bit like marginalized or maybe misunderstood. And so a lot of times INFPs will aspire to be, at least the ones I've met, aspire to be writers or authors, you know, in the very stereotypically creative fields. Their third function is introverted sensing, and introverted sensing is all about taking in information and then kind of understanding the impressions it made on you. So maybe someone wore something or they said something, and then later you go and think about it, and you think about what it meant to you. So it's a lot about memories and how things should be done. It's a lot about memories and being responsible, being reliable, being consistent when it's used in a good way. I'll talk about INFPs don't necessarily always use it in the best way, but if it was used in a good way, it's a lot about tradition and loyalty and being there for people who have been there for you for a long time. Introverted sensing, in my experience, actually really likes to take orders from people. And then finally, the fourth function is extroverted thinking. And extroverted thinking is all about like, what does the group think about something? What does the group say is the best way to do this, the most efficient way to do this, the most logical way to do this? And so it's a lot about procedure. It can be about efficiency, goal setting. I get like CEO vibes from this function, and I get hippie vibes from introverted feelings. They're kind of like opposites. You got, you know, the hippie and the CEO. So yeah, it's all about getting things done, setting high goals, achieving them, using numbers. So maybe like in quarter 2, we want to increase our revenue 15%. It's like that kind of thing. And so for INFPs, this function is generally shut off. They don't usually, you know, exercise this part of them very much. So I kind of want to go through and talk about like how the INFP uses each of these functions. I believe that introversion and extroversion are both needs, just like food and water are both needs. And you might have a preference for one or the other, like you might prefer food over water. But at the end of the day, despite your preference, they're both needs because they both do things for you. So what introversion does for you is it allows you to think deeply about things and kind of distill down to the clarity, to get a deep wisdom about things. And what extroversion does, it allows you to impact. You can create things, you can impact the world, you can get out there and you can take that depth that you've created and you can now impact lots of people. And also when you're out there in the world extroverting, you get new information, which you can then think about and churn and distill into wisdom, and then you output some more. And it's kind of like a cycle. You need the extroversion and the introversion. You got to get the input, you got to output. You get the input, you output. And you churn it around all those times. So what can happen is for introverts, they tend to get too introverted, and that means they lose their impact. Extroverts have their own issues, things they tend to do, but introverts tend to lose impact. They tend to not be around people. When you're not around people, you might not be getting diverse information, so that can lead like toward conspiracy theories. And if you're not impacting, that can lead to a sense of uselessness, maybe depression, because everyone wants to go and impact people deep down. Everyone wants to feel like they have a purpose in this world and to bring meaning and to better the world. So for INFPs, they will tend to be too introverted, and the way they'll do that is they'll stay with introverted feeling, their first function, and you know the first two functions are used as a strength, so ideally they'd be using their first two functions, but what they do is they go down into their third function, because they're both introverted. That's kind of what INFPs do when they're in their comfort zone. And people in general, like introverts, will get energy from being introverted. So if someone's unhealthy, like an INFP, if they're unhealthy, is not going to want to be extroverted because it doesn't give them energy. It expands their comfort zone. It's ultimately good for them. It's a growth move, but it's not going to give them energy. And so when they're unhealthy and you're just trying to survive, You're not trying to like expand your limits. You're just like, I'm just going to hunker down and like do what I can, let this pass. I'm just trying to survive. So, everyone goes through times like that, and that's completely understandable. But if you go through years of that, that's really a problem, because then for like an INFP, they're not having an impactful life. So what can happen is if an INFP is too much an introverted feeling and introverted sensing can be just a lot about being in your comfort zone. Introverted sensing is all about what's safe. We don't want to explore. We don't want to try anything new. We're just going to do the tried and true method, and we're going to live a small life. We're going to be nice and safe. We're not going to have big dreams. And INFPs in general, with their extrovert intuition, have big dreams. They want to be authors. They want to be musicians. They have these big dreams, which I think that's amazing. That's like what they're made to do, to explore and push the limits. But when they're too much in introverted sensing, they stop all that, they give up their big dreams, and they just do the small thing, which they're not meant to do. That's not what INFPs are meant to do. That's not their gift to the world. And they start saying, you know what, everyone's right, I'm just not going to make it. And they lose the optimism the extroverted intuition gives them, and they start being very pessimistic. You know what, in the past, this bad thing happened, and now my life is just all downhill from here, and this is how the past informs my future, and I just don't have what it takes. I'm just going to do the small thing. I guess I'm just going to get a 9-to-5 job. I tried that out for a while, but this is what I'm doing. And it leads them to get into routines. Introverted sensing can be about routines, but they're usually like bad routines, like addiction, like addictive routines, like they have a little bit of extrovert intuition, which is like, ooh, what's new? And so they maybe want to like try drugs or like shrooms or random stuff. And then introverted sensing will create a bad routine out of it, or a bad habit. And so a lot of times INFPs will have bad eating routines, or maybe they're addicted to drugs. I've known several INFPs who do a lot of drugs. And ultimately, they're just doing anything that can make them comfortable. SI can be a lot about like, what do I want to do that's comfortable? Well, I just want to sit at home, do drugs, live a small life, play video games, hang out with friends, It just can lead them to live kind of a small life. So that right there is worst case scenario. If they're in a loop, that's INFP's worst case scenario. They're living a small life by themselves, maybe getting into conspiracy theories. Not that doing the introverted sensing thing is small, but I just mean small in the sense of it's not their purpose. And so in that case, it's small. So extroverted intuition, what that would do is it brings you out of that. It brings you out of your comfort zone. It expands it. It says, let's not do what everyone else is doing. Let's do a career that no one else is doing, because that's what you're made to do. You are meant to invent. And if you don't have some inventiveness and creativity in your life, that's kind of a sign that you're in introverted sensing going in the wrong way. So it's saying, you know what, let's bust out of the comfort zone. Let's be brave. It gives an optimism for the future, because it says, I'm going to create my own future. And it gives you a sense of optimism. It gives you energy. It gives you wildly creative ideas, because NE is so creative. And that's exactly the kind of like artist that you want, that I think INFPs want to be. So it gives you the creativity and the artistic creations. So I think INFPs need to boost up their extroverted intuition to be using that. Try to be using it like 70% of the time. Try to be using it in many contexts of your life. Use that creativity and that inventiveness and that optimism. Use it in your finances, in your relationships, in the way you eat, in the routines you set for yourself, in every area of your life. Just like brainstorm, how can I use this more? How can I be more extroverted? How can I create more? And how can I just do things differently? Break out of the mold from other people. The other extroverted function that INFPs have is extroverted thinking. I think the default mode for INFPs is they're using it like 2% of the time. And I think they should bump that up a little, integrate it, maybe try to use it 10% of the time. It's not going to be a strength. You're not going to turn into an extroverted thinker, some TJ, but bump it up a little bit, because what I've noticed can happen is extroverted thinking for an INFP whispers at their aspirations. Like, I have this big goal. I want to be an artist. A dominant extroverted thinker would know, okay, this is where I want to go. So steps, and I'll take steps to get there. And I might hate a bunch of the steps. I'll have to grind through it. It might take 20 years, but eventually you get there. INFPs understand that the goal's up here. They understand the concept of like goal setting, or I have this aspiration that I want up here. But sometimes INFPs don't have an understanding that sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do, or that are not fun. And sometimes you might have to do that for 20 years to get to the point you want to be at. And I think TJs understand like a means to an end. You know, you do 20 years of crappy work so that you can enjoy the entire rest of your life, 60 years after that. But I think sometimes INFPs just don't understand, like, where do I even get started? Like, if I have this goal that's 1,000 steps long, what is step one? Like, how do I take steps to get there? And then if they did understand what steps to get there, to actually execute on them. TE can really help you execute on those goals. And it's not to become a TJ or to become an extroverted thinker. It's to amplify your introverted feeling goals. If you have a goal of being an artist or a writer, you're not going to turn to some bland cubicle worker working your way up the ladder, because I don't think that's what INFPs want to do. I mean, if you want to do that, I'm not saying that you couldn't do that, but I just imagine that's what INFPs would hate to do. So if you would hate working in a cubicle, don't do it. So you don't need to work on extroverted thinking that much, but just work on it to the extent where you're accomplishing your purpose. If you want to be an artist, grind it out, put in the hard work to get there. Because I think sometimes introverted feeling is like, I'm so unique. One day I'm just going to be discovered. My destiny is to be a singer. So one day I'm just going to be in my bedroom and someone's going to discover me. But extroverted thinking understands you have to create your own luck. Like, if you want to be a singer, you're going to have to go to 1,000 bars and play at 1,000 bars, and then you'll get lucky one night because you created your own luck. I think the polarity between introverted feeling and extroverted thinking I've described as creating luck. Introverted feeling understands you have a destiny, there's this luck sense of it, you have this purpose. And extroverted thinking understands you have to grind to get there and create it. And I think that's what needs to be integrated a little bit more. You are special, but you need to prove it to people. Because you do inherently have value as a human, but you got to show people that you're a talented musician. We don't just necessarily know that. I think it gives a sense of grind, a sense of productivity, and it will really amplify the artist on you counterintuitively by working on a little bit of extroverted thinking. It'll just amplify more of who you are. So I think when INFPs are healthy, it's just like this amazing concoction. They really bring out the beauty in the dark side of life. They help people understand that there's beautiful in the difficult and the great parts of life and everything in between. And there's like this spectrum, like this mosaic of, experiences that people have in life. And I think, for people like myself, like a TJ, sometimes I'm not very in tune with that sort of thing. And it really, when I experience an INFP's art, it just kind of like awakens something in me. I think INFPs think in a way that's very different than how a lot of people think. And so when you can take all of that stuff that you have on the inside and create something with it and kind of give all the rest of us like a peek of what the inside of you is like, it's an amazing transformational experience. I just like applaud all the INFPs out there, and I just hope that they do it. Every time I hear of another INFP that gave up on their dream and, went to work in a cubicle, I just get my heart breaks for it. And the story that I've seen, this is what I've seen. I'll just put it out there. I've known three INFPs that have done this thing. They set a goal of being a musician or a writer. They give it a shot for a month. They really solidly give it a shot for a month. And then they do nothing for about 8 months. Then they really give it a shot for a month. Then they do nothing for like 10 months. Then they really give a shot, and then they do nothing. It's like in these spurts where they're really productive, really creative, using that NE and that TE, but it's not consistent enough to really move the needle. And after like 3 years of nothing happening, in reality, they worked like 3 months of those 3 years, they just like give up. And they're like, well, I guess I just can't do the starving artist thing. Everyone else was right. But they didn't really give it a fair shot in my mind. They didn't give it a fair shot. I say you give yourself 5 years of consistent work without the fits and starts. Like, you consistently work at it for 5 years. In my mind, that seems pretty guaranteed to work out, even if you suck. Like, let's say you're a terrible singer and you want to be a singer. You would gain so much skill in 5 years. Supposedly it takes 5 years to become an expert at something. And so if you can just really dedicate yourself to doing something for 5 years. So I say give it a consistent shot for like 5 years, work hard, grind it out. And then if it still doesn't work, then quit. Give yourself permission to quit, but really make sure that you gave yourself the time and the patience to get all those hours, the 5 years, to really become an expert at it. That's my video on INFPs. Like I said before, I have a complete Myers-Briggs start to finish playlist. I'll link it up above. If any of this was over your head, or if you want more in general information, I go more in depth in some other videos. So yeah, check those out. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.